video. Now I know it's been a while since I've posted a video. It's been a little bit of a busy summer, but I did want to get a video published here soon. So today's going to be a little bit of a simple video, and it's going to be another Petri rangefinder. This is the third one that I'll have reviewed, and probably will be the last one for a while. So if you're getting tired of me talking about Petri rangefinders, this should be the last one you'll have to sit through for a while. So the camera I'm going to talk about today is this camera right here. This is a Petri Blue-Scope, also known as a Petri Blue Magic Scope, as marked on the camera, and in some markets was referred to as the Petri Touch, although there's a little bit to talk about there, so I'll get to that a little later in the video. Now, the Petri Blue-Scope was introduced in 1961, 1962, somewhere around there. It is essentially a simplified version of the Petri 7, which, if you remember from my Petri 7S video, the Petri 7 was a one-year edition predecessor to the Petri 7S, which I reviewed in a previous video. The Petri 7S was produced for quite a long time, over 10 years. The Petri 7 before it was only produced for a year. This Petri Blue-Scope was introduced during the Petri 7 run, but continued beyond the Petri 7 run in through and overlapped with the Petri 7S run. A little strange. It uses the same body as the Petri 7, but it is essentially a stripped down version of that. So if you'll note here, it does not include a light meter. You'll see there's no light meter around the lens. It is a little different than other Petris in that it uses a blue tinted glass for the secondary rangefinder window. I believe this is the only camera that they produced with that blue color. All of their other ones used the Petri Greenomatic system with the green glass, as I showed on both the 7S and the Petri 2.8. Now, one other limitation to this camera, it was only offered in the f2.8 lens. It did not include an f1.9 model like the 7 and the 7S did. If we start looking at the details, you'll notice a couple more slight reductions compared to the 7. Now, the Petri Blue-Scope includes a very similar shutter to the 7 and the 7S, although it does not include a provision for flash bulb synchronization. So it does include a self-timer right here, but there's no lever to switch between electronic flash and flash bulbs. Instead, what it does is shows you the appropriate shutter speeds to use for either electronic flash here in red or for flash bulbs here in yellow. So you're limited to slower shutter speeds when using flash bulbs, since there's no synchronization. Now, interestingly, since this was produced overlapping with both the Petri 7 and the 7S, the early cameras were produced when the company was still called Kurabayashi, and if you look very closely, you'll see an embossed symbol of Kurabayashi here in the corner. Mine is an early model. After the company changed their name to Petri, this same embossed emblem was changed to a Petri emblem. Although it's so subtle, it's almost impossible to see unless you're looking very closely. Now, the other difference, for some reason, they decided to offer the Petri Blue-Scope in either the traditional black leatherette or in this gray leatherette. So you actually had an option for gray on the lower cost model. So let's take a quick peek at some of the features of the camera beyond the ones I've just talked about. If you watch my Petri 7S video, this is going to look like a pretty familiar layout. The shutter speed is on a ring at the front of the lens. The f-stop is on another ring closer to the body of the lens. Focus is achieved with this lever here. It's a very short throw, just like the 7 and the 7S. Top of the camera is pretty standard. A regular shutter release button, rewind knob, and shutter wind lever here. It has a manually reset frame counter, which you have to manually reset when you put new film in, and a simple cold shoe. That's about it. One thing to note here, I do want to point out on the camera it is marked Petri Blue Magic Scope. Although on the boxes that these cameras came in, they're referred to as the Petri Blue-Scope and also referred to as the Petri Blue-Scope in the manual. I'll talk a little bit more about that too, because there's a little confusion about what this camera is actually named. It's a very simple camera. We'll load it up with some film and take it out shooting and see what this can do. So I'm going to be loading the Petri Blue-Scope with this expired roll of GAF VersaPan. This particular roll expired in 1971, as you can see here, so over 50 years ago. I've had really good success with VersaPan, both the GAF and the previous Ansco version. It comes in this fun little package set here. Obviously, being from this era, the late 60s, early 70s, it comes with paperwork that talks about all of the details of the film, which is actually pretty cool. I wish they still did that. And then the film itself comes in this fun little bright red case. Now, interestingly, this film expiring in 1971 means it was probably produced around 67 or 68. And that was the time when Ansco was changing their name to GAF. So even though the packaging says GAF, the cartridge inside has Ansco labeling. So loading the film is pretty straightforward, typical of any 35mm camera of this era. I attach it first to the take-up spool, and then I like to tighten up the film with the rewind knob. And then as I'm forwarding the first couple frames, I can actually see and verify that the film is correctly attached. Now this camera, as I said, has manual reset, so I need to set the film counter to 0. And that's it. It is ready to start shooting. Well, let's talk about what this camera is actually called. As you can see on the label, it is labeled Blue Magic Scope. And from everything I've been able to tell, every camera that was produced as a Blue-Scope was labeled with this label, Blue Magic Scope. However, the box and the instructions both call this camera the Petri Blue-Scope, without the word magic in there. And then, to make it even more confusing, in the Japanese market, it apparently was marketed as the Petri Touch. And a lot of the information about the camera online often refers to this camera as the Petri Touch. I have not been able to find one single copy of the camera that is labeled Touch, even in the Japanese market. The only camera that appears to have this label Touch on it is a camera that appears in the manual, and as you can see, that word Touch definitely looks to me like it was retouched into the photo. So take this for what it's worth. I have not been able to find a camera called the Petri Touch. All of the cameras, as far as I can tell, are called the Petri Blue-Scope and labeled the Petri Blue Magic Scope. Okay, so what do I think about this little beauty? Well, it's a very simple camera. There's not a lot to it. There's no light meter to worry about. You simply set your shutter speed and your aperture and focus and fire away. So in that regard, it's pretty fun to use. Sometimes going basic really makes life a lot more enjoyable. There's not a lot to think about. I pair this camera with my Hedeco Lime 2 light meter, which I've talked about in a previous video. It clips right on, it looks great, and is super easy to use. So that's about it for this video. Just a quick one on a very simple camera, and hopefully I will see you again soon.